4 years into my medical training to become a doctor, which usually lasts 6 years, by the way, in my country, I had made up my mind that I'm not going to practice as a doctor for the rest of my life. I had already called it quits. And why is this? I had partially experienced what it feels like to make money. I didn't grow up in a privileged background. I can say we were really poor growing up, and so I had struggled through school. But at the university, that was really exacerbated because at this point, I felt mature. You see, when you're younger, you don't have any problem asking your parents for money, asking other people for money because you feel like they have the right to give you money. But here I was now at the university, and I'm certainly older, you know, I'm 20-something years old, and I felt so bad having to ask my parents for money. Of course, I was struggling at the university. I didn't have money to print work. I didn't have money for a lot of the academic things that I required at school. But I couldn't go and ask my parents for money. So I felt the dire need for me to start making money. So while at the university, using some of the skills that I had, you know, learned over the years at the university, things like, you know, some graphic designing, a bit of video editing, some photo editing, I decided to start myself a business. This was a bumper sticker making business on the university, and it picked up. I wasn't making a lot of money. On my best day, I would make about $30 a day. But for a university student who has been struggling, $30 a day is crazy. I mean, even just $10 a day for the days that I would work was really crazy for me. So I started getting some money, and I actually noticed that if I did graduate as a doctor, you know, a few years later, my first month getting a salary as a doctor, or, you know, over the first year of me getting a salary as a doctor, I would earn less from my salary as a doctor than I would earn if I was making $30 a day simply selling bumper stickers. So I knew it deep down in my heart that there is no way I'm going to stick with being a doctor for the rest of my life. Now, this was exacerbated after my training. I took a trip outside my country for about 2 to 3 months. This was the very first time that I did leave my country. I went to a country in South America called Uruguay. Yeah, I can imagine a lot of people have heard about it for soccer reasons. Yeah, so I went over there, and you wouldn't say that it's a proper first world country, but for me it was a lot of contrast between what I knew in my country and what I got to experience there. For me, from where I had always been, it was proper first world kind of country. And when I got there, I saw how different the life was from the kind of life that I was used to. First of all, it opened up my eyes to understand that life is so different. So every part of the world and everywhere you go looks at the world so differently. For them, it is normal, and that's how they look at the world. But for you, it's very different. So if they came over here to Uganda, for example, they would see the world very differently. When I went over there, I reflected so much upon my life because I saw how different they lived their lives. I saw how different their expectations were. Money that we considered a lot of money in Uganda was not so much money for them. The things that they paid priority to were not the things that we paid priority to. And so I spent a lot of my days simply seated down and reflecting and trying to think and imagine how life can be different and how I can implement life and make my life better. So when I went over there, I had plans of probably someday leaving my country and working outside my country as a doctor. I would certainly earn more money, maybe work as a cardiologist, maybe a plastic surgeon or something like that in one of those really cool countries so that I earn way more money. But then when I noticed what money usually comes with when you're not living and working in your country, I told myself, well, I think my decision to quit being a doctor has even been confirmed a bit more. You see, we all imagine that if one day we do quit our jobs, then our lives are going to be happier. We imagine that it's our job, our job that's tying us from being happy. You imagine that if you're not being chased away from your job and you leave because it's not mandatory, you've simply made a voluntary decision because of something you want to do in your life to take your life forward, then you're going to be a happier person. And it makes sense in a lot of circumstances, but it's not always it. And it's not like I hated my job. No, I didn't hate my job. I actually loved my job because my job involved doing a lot of surgeries, and I love doing surgeries. But every time a surgery was done, I noticed that I felt empty. I didn't feel fulfilled. I didn't feel like I was living the kind of life that I wanted to live. I just knew that outside there was something that would fulfill me, something that would make me feel happier. So at the age of 28, I did quit my job. Now, that was at least 3 years earlier than I thought I would quit my job. Earlier on, I had planned to quit my job when, anytime between 31 and 33, I felt would have been perfect for me. I would still have a very long life to live and a lot of things to pay attention to. But also, I imagined that by that time, I would probably have made enough money for me to invest in other things for me to quit. Luckily enough, I was able to quit at 28, 3 years earlier. And why? It's because, first of all, I'm a very self-driven person. I'm the kind of person who, when I put my mind to do something, I almost always do it. I don't waste time when it comes to doing things. I'm very self-driven. I'm very purpose-driven. I know how to put in the effort to attain the goals that I do want to attain. So when I was still practicing as a doctor, I did start a business. For me, that was a farming business where I was simply selling eggs. And the advantage with things like selling eggs is that they are very scalable. There are a lot of businesses that you can start, but they're not scalable, i.e. you have a limit of how big the business can grow. But for me, this is a very scalable business. At that time, I was having about 800 chickens, but I could easily scale up to 1 million chickens and still be involved in business, or even more than 1 million chickens. So it is something scalable, and because of that, I quickly got to the point where I could quit my job and be comfortable with what I'm doing. Now, when we usually quit our jobs, we have particular expectations. I personally had some expectations, and most people do have particular expectations. You imagine that when you do quit your job, number one, you'll have more time to sleep because no one is waking you up, 5 a.m., 6 a.m. to prepare and go to work, where you have to show up at 9 a.m. and work for, 8 hours, nothing like that. So if you don't feel like you want to go to work very early or you want to start working very early, you can sleep. If it's raining very early in the morning, you can sleep for longer hours. Also, you imagine that you'll get more time to spend with loved ones. And also the imagination is that you're going to have less stress working with people, because for a lot of people, one of the things that they really hate about their workplaces is having to deal with the stress of having fellow employees or your boss or people who are under you, and you're trying to supervise them and give them directions and they are stressing you. You're imagining, I'm going to get rid of all of this. We also imagine that we make more money when we are working for ourselves, because all of a sudden you don't have to work for your boss. You're working for your boss, you're making him more money, but he's giving you a very small tiny percentage of all the effort you're putting in. And also we imagine that with the money that we are making, we certainly are going to live a more fulfilled life. We're going to live a happier life. We're going to be able to get the things that we want whenever we do want them. Unfortunately, when I did quit my job as a doctor, I actually noticed that it's the exact opposite for a lot of the things that we do imagine. It's completely the total opposite. Number one, you don't get to sleep more. Usually you end up sleeping less, because when you do start a business, you actually then realize that the business is your baby. Just imagine a mother and baby. When a mother does have a baby, they barely sleep. They'll sleep 2-3 hours a night, or even less than that, and they don't care about it. Why? Because it's their baby. They have to take care of their baby. Same thing, when you do start a business, you then notice that the success of the business is really dependent a lot on the effort that you put in. And so, whilst on your 8 to 5 job, you are working for someone, and if it got to 5, you really didn't care, your time of working was done, you had to go home. While you're working for yourself, you do notice that there's nothing like 8 to 5, yeah? It's midnight to midnight, or maybe midnight to 4 a.m., or maybe 4 a.m. to midnight. You only sleep for 2, 3, 4 hours, and for you that's okay because it's your baby. So usually you end up sleeping less. No one wants their own thing to fail. Number two, you also notice that you have less time for your family. So while you are working a job of 8 to 5, at 5 you get to leave your job, maybe get stuck in traffic and get home at 7. Between 7 and 5 a.m. you have time for your family. But if you're doing your own thing, you might even be doing it in your own house. You're starting your own business in your own house. But because you're too consumed in the business, you even never have time to spend with the people that you love, the people who are around you. There is no connection with them at all. So you just end up working full time. You literally spend less time with the people that you love. The other thing that I did learn is that you usually then get more stress from the people that you're working with. You see, when you're working at your workplace, it's not your job to deal with other human beings. It is the HR's job, the human resources job. If something is problematic, you send the problem over to someone else. But when you are running your own business, you're doing your own work, every other person who is associated with the work is your responsibility. And you feel like you have a direct responsibility to ensure that they are performing and getting the best results. And so all of a sudden, the stress even becomes more, because now it affects you directly. Their ability or inability to work will not only affect you on an emotional level. You see, when you are working in that job, you are affected on an emotional level. You don't like working with this person because maybe they overtalk, maybe they don't know how to relate in a nice way to you. So it's emotional, yeah? Or maybe it affects your performance just a little bit. But when they are working in your business, it's not only on an emotional level, it's also on a financial level. So if they don't perform, your business loses money. If they don't perform, things don't work out well. Your clients complain. And all of a sudden, you're even more invested emotionally right now in these people. And so the stress even becomes harder on you. The other thing is that it's not like you always assured of more money. You assume that you're going to get more money, but it's not assured. You then notice that unlike a job where you are being paid a consistent salary, when you do start your own things, your money fluctuates. And if you're not careful enough, you're going to end up getting way less than you were earning as an employee. For me, in this case, it's earning as a doctor. If I wasn't paying attention, if I wasn't putting in as much effort and trying to make sure that the business succeeds, then I would end up earning way less than what I would be earning as a doctor. Luckily enough for me, I did have a lot of drive and a lot of passion and a lot of effort, and I put in a lot of the work, and I ended up earning 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more times than what I was earning as a doctor. And of course, with earning more money, that meant that then I could do the things I love. I could be able to afford the things that I did love. For example, I bought myself a vintage car. I started expanding the farms. I started spending a bit more time, with family. I could go and have a nice meal somewhere I want to, have the nice meal when I do want. But then I later realized that despite the more money that I was making, despite the fact that I had gotten a lot of the things that I thought I loved, despite the fact that I had quit my job and now I could enjoy, I noticed that I wasn't any happier. If anything, I was much more sad. I imagined that if I owned particular things, for example, dogs, I had always wanted to own dogs. I imagined that if I did own dogs, I would be happier. I started owning dogs. Currently, I own more than 20 dogs. They didn't make me any happier. I imagined that if I have a vintage car, I'll be really excited. Every time the vintage car was in the garage and they're fixing it, trying to get it to the specs that I wanted, I was so excited about it. I couldn't wait to get it. And now I get it. I only get to drive it once a month, twice a month if I do really well. Sometimes it will take me 3 months before I drive it. And they make me any much happier than I actually was without having it. At that time, I was recording YouTube videos using my phone. And then I started buying these cameras. I'm thinking when I do have money, I buy these cameras. I get a first camera, a second camera. I get, all kinds of cameras. I get drones. They didn't make me any happier. Right now, a lot of them are just stuck somewhere, not being utilized. So about a year back, I decided to start reflecting upon my life deeply, after the passing of my mom. I noticed that life is short, in all honesty. You see, my mom passed on at a really young age. She was 51 when she passed on. So I started thinking to myself, well, life is short. What then do I have to do to ensure that my life turns out to be happy? What do I have to do to ensure that I don't regret life, that I'm not just spending time running here, running there, being excited about the fact that I quit my job, but I'm not happy? And after having the reflections, I noticed that number one, quitting your job in itself as an action is not a source of happiness. So there's a lot of you people outside there who are imagining that if you do quit your job, you're going to be happier. Well, I want to break the news to you that quitting your job in itself is not what's going to make you happy. Another thing that I did realize that having more money is not what makes you happy. There's a lot of people who have more money and their drive is to simply have more and more money. But if you don't put one thing in line with these two things, quitting your job and making money, then you're never going to be happier. And what is that one thing that you have to embrace? It's called purpose. You've got to develop a purpose in your life. You've got to develop that one thing or those things that are things from the spirit. You see, happiness in the end comes from the inside of you. What I noticed is that happiness doesn't come from without. It comes from within. It doesn't come from the things that you get. It doesn't come from the things that you are given from the outside. It comes from the things that you create from inside your heart. And usually that is purpose. For me, the one thing that I believe brought me to this point was to appreciate my mortality. You see, for a lot of people, it is quite difficult to appreciate their mortality. Every day, we see a lot of death happening around us. You see, a lot of people who have died from your earlier years in school. You always see in news people dying each and every day. But for one reason or another, we never imagine our own mortality. We never think about the fact that 2 days from now, you could be absent. Just like, the kid who got knocked on the road somewhere, or, the house that got burnt and someone died inside there. We never imagine that our own lives could end very soon. And because of that, we are consistently in the pursuit of more without paying attention to the inner truths that will make us happy. So I decided to start imagining my mortality. And for me, I came to accept the fact that life can end at any time. Yeah, when you do understand and appreciate the fact that life can end at any time, then the things you do start making more meaning to you, and also you become more intentional about the things that you start doing in your life, because then you know that life can end at any time, and in the face of death, some things are more important than others. So what then did I decide to pay attention to? Number one, since I struggled through school and I struggled to have my tuition paid throughout school, I decided that I'm going to be paying the tuition for some people. Yeah, and that is something that I actively decided to do. I know that sometimes the financial constraints might be there, but for me, I find more fulfillment knowing that I'm working hard and trying to make more money so that I can afford to pay tuition for someone else. For me, that brings me a lot of joy. So then working hard and quitting my job to work hard then gets some form of purpose, some form of passion, because then someone gets to go to school, someone gets to not struggle and actually have their goals and dreams fulfilled. So that is something that really makes me happy. Another thing is I get to be more intentional about the time that I do spend with family. You see, it's very different when you do spend time with family, but you're not intentional about trying to make sure that you get the most fulfillment out of it. I may not have all the hours that I want to spend with my family, but when I do get time to spend with them, I make sure that it's quality time. I make sure that I'm available. Also, I'm more intentional in making sure that I'm available as much as possible. My daughters, for example, don't really care about the fact that I'm struggling and hustling to make money, to pay their tuition, to buy them food, to give them everything that they need. They don't care. For them, what they want is that I'm around, I've availed everything that they need emotionally. That means being present and playing with them and smiling with them and, you know, throw the ball at them when they throw back the ball to me. That is the thing that they care about. And so I try to be as intentional as possible about that, trying to make sure that I'm available physically, emotionally, and they feel fulfilled that they are spending time with me. Another thing that I've paid attention to is try to help those that helped me when I was younger. You see, the thing that's happening a lot in the current world is that when people do grow up, they forget about the parents and the other people who raised them, the people who helped them when they were in need, the people who helped them when they were younger. Of course, our parents have the responsibility of taking care of us when we are young. But a lot of people actually do have parents who didn't take care of them. A lot of people have parents who left them when they were young and they didn't give a damn about them and they didn't raise them. I mean, if they raised you well, if they put in the effort, they paid your tuition, they gave you food, they took care of you. If you were sick, they took you to hospital. I feel like it's only responsible of us and it's only of a great heart from us for us to take care of them when now they are in need of us. I mean, yes, you could decide to take your parents to, you know, an elderly home, but is that the best that you can really do? Would they have done that for you if you were younger? They quit their job. I mean, they left their workplace to come and spend time with you when you were sick. You probably were sick for a whole year and they didn't take you and leave you in hospital. So it doesn't make sense that you decide to just take them somewhere and dump them because you also have a family of your own. I mean, these are my personal thoughts and they don't need to be your thoughts. But for me, I feel like this creates more fulfillment for me. You know, instead of being outside there and looking for money, it creates more fulfillment for me to know that I can take care of the people who took care of me, that I can utilize the resources that I'm making to take care of the people who gave their whole, I mean physically and emotionally, to take care of me. That brings me a lot of satisfaction. And also it gives me a lot of satisfaction to take care of other people in society. My workers, for example, a lot of them, this is the one thing that they can do. If it's, for example, on the farm, working on the farm is the one thing that they can do that can bring them money that then they can utilize to make sure that, you know, they are helping their families, they are helping their parents, they are helping other people. And so for me, it's very important that the business grows, that the things that I do grow, so that then I can have more money to pay them and even pay way more people in order to make sure that, you know, they find fulfillment and they have the best results for them. So after reflecting upon these things over, you know, the year and, you know, more recently, I then find more fulfillment and more drive in the fact that I quit my job, not because I wanted to quit my job to be happy, but then because I found a greater sense of purpose. So happiness in itself doesn't come from quitting your job. Yeah. So if you're sitting somewhere and you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm in a job, if I quit my job, I would be happier. No, that's not where the happiness comes from. Happiness comes from having the greater goals in life and having those things and understanding the things that will fulfill you. Now, if you do quit your job in order to pursue more money or, to have more time in order to fulfill these things, then that makes more sense. But in itself, quitting your job is not what makes you happy. And yes, I don't want to lie to myself or to any of you that I actually did quit my job so that I get more money. I've already told you that. Yeah. For me, one of the primary goals was that I knew I could make way more money outside medicine, outside being a doctor, than I could inside being a doctor. And so there are a few things that I learned about money, even before I quit my job, that literally made me call it quits. These things, when I discovered them, they made me make up my mind that, hey, I'm quitting my job as a doctor, and I'm going to go and pursue business. I made a video about these 4 things, and I'll leave a link to it right here. You can check it out. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, smash the notification bell. That way you never miss out on an upload. Catch you very soon with another video. Lots of love. Bye-bye.